Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. This is part 2 with Michael Gervais.
What I've come to learn is that everybody already knows how to do this. So what we ask people to do is we have a fundamental belief that everything you need is already inside you. Okay, so how have you been successful in the past doing this? And they say, I don't know.
This is another episode of our Innovation and Leadership series where we interview pro athletes, world-class musicians, CEOs, Hollywood filmmakers, and a wide variety of other high achievers. Also, I want to talk to you about one of our show's sponsors. I met these guys back on episode 6. CEO Zach Smith was telling me all about starting a skateboard company and how much he hated doing the bookkeeping for a skateboard shop, and how he really got led to start this business, Bookly, that's a hybrid combining bookkeeping software and human services. And I'll tell you why I let him become a sponsor. It's because I use their service now. I don't love paying $50 an hour for bookkeepers to do stuff that I know software could do way, way cheaper. But I don't love bookkeeping at all. So I want a real live human who knows what they're talking about to help me with the stuff I don't understand. Probably the straw that broke the camel's back for me, though, the thing that put me over the top was that they could do my taxes and payroll also. So totally suggest checking them out. Go to their website, bookly.co, and check out their flat rates. I've been super happy with them. So now on to today's episode.
Michael, before we continue the conversation, because I pretty much just want to go on the same track we did from part 1, let's take a little bit of a right turn. One of the things we like to ask a lot of our guests is, we've got this charity, Child Rescue, trying to prevent child trafficking. Our listeners know about it. Not knowing hardly anything about what we do, we've got these for high school kids, by high school kids prevention campaigns in America. We help build an aftercare facility in Cusco, Peru. We help fund law enforcement trainings, or sometimes we even send guys on undercover rescue missions to help law enforcement in the developing world, or fund those things. If you were our advisor, say, trying to help us, gain a level of mastery at getting more people involved in combating this crime, what advice would you have for us?
Fantastic mission that you've committed to, and what a hard topic and a absolute crisis of a condition that these children are in. So the first thing that I would suggest is people that are involved in any sort of mission-based work that is intense as what you guys are spending time in are going to be required to have the capacity, because it's such an empathetic and compassion-based work and it can become exhausting at the intensity of the emotion, that the people that you're directly involved with, you want them to stay involved as long as you can with their best self, with their resources. So I would help the people that are already part of your ecosystem to learn how to recover in a world-class way, and to learn how to become more mindful. They're already very mindful, but to become more mindful so that they can strengthen the empathy, compassion, and the conviction skills required to go on this very nasty and brutal, predatory combatants that they're needing to face down and compete with. So I would start with the internal group, and I would make sure that every time that we're together, or through any medium that you can, that you would help them recover. And the 4 pillars of recovery are sleeping in a world-class way. And that's 68% of humans need between 7 and 8 hours of sleep just to be normal. And so I would help support them on ways to get the right quality and the right depth of sleep. And I would just mention it a lot and value it a lot. So it's part of your world that, hey, we're on this mission together. Let's get our sleep right, because we need each other to be great to do this. These kids need us. And then the second is to make sure we're talking about, the second pillar of recovery is to make sure we're talking about fueling ourselves well. And so fueling ourselves with hydration and with proper nutrition. And so to help your people, again, to be mission-minded for the long haul, is to help them make great choices on nutrition. And, the most basic frame of that is you want to get a lot of colors on your plate that come from Mother Nature. Skittles and M&Ms and Starbucks, what are they called? Starburst. Those are not the colors we're talking about, right? Like colorful foods on your plate. And with what we're trying to get for most people is somewhere between 20, 30 grams of protein on a regular basis. And you want to help people eat more than one meal a day, like 3 meals to 5 meals a day, somewhere in that range, to be optimal with the way that we burn our fuel. And then on the hydration side, you want to make sure that you're a rule of thumb that we have for people that sweat in an average way is 40 ounces before 4 o'clock as a bare minimum. And then the third pillar of recovery is to help people move well. So most people that are obviously not world-class and elite athletes, which is where I spend my time with, is that we need to encourage them to move more. And so the basic idea is 2 to 2.5 hours of some sort of moderate cardiovascular work and 2 to 2.5 hours of some sort of resistance or strength training per week. So somewhere around 4 to 5 hours a week of moderate to intense exercise. And we know that interval training is a bit better for people, where you get your heart rate up and then you bring it back down, and get it back up again and bring it back down. And the more fit you are, the faster you can do it. But if you're just starting off, you want to make sure that that cadence is appropriate for yourself. So we recommend on the pillar 2 is to go get with a nutritionist or somebody that's really thoughtful and studied nutrition. And in 3 hours, you'll know 80% of what they know. And then the same on the fitness world, like in the fitness world, get with a coach. And in 3 sessions, you'll know 60%, 70% of what they know. And then the last pillar of recovery is training think well. So we've got sleep well, fuel well, move well, and then think well. And the Think Well platform is really grounded in mindfulness. It's grounded in optimism, and it's grounded in strategies to be confident. And then so we make sure that we help people with those 3 skills.
That's awesome. Well, and I want to talk about what you and Coach Pete Carroll are doing at Compete to Create. It's kind of, looking at the 21st century answers and how technology can help, organizations or businesses or people that want to do more of this. So before we jump into, what you guys are doing with your apps or what form that takes, I'd love to put it through the lens of some of the things we were talking about in part 1 of the episode. And specifically, I want to pick on one thing you brought up. You talked about, hey, it's not never having negative thoughts cross your mind. It's the excessive dwelling on them that you're leaking your power out. You're leaking your you're leaking your drive. For somebody to
that sounds so funny, right? Yeah, that you're leaking. But
yeah,
literally on the side. It's funny to hear you say that, but on the sidelines, it's a funny little joke. Because I'll walk by somebody, and as long as we've got a good relationship with each other, and I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, and I'll walk by and go, "Bro, you are leaking," and he's like, "You're right, I am freaking leaking," and he's like, "Oh, I'm leaking right now with you," and then we start laughing. Because it's like all this extra energy that you're burning, worrying about something that went wrong or that it's not going to work. You're just leaking, And so, literally, get your stuff together now. And how do you get yourself together in that way? You got to front load the mental training. And I can't tell you how excited I am that the science is here. Some of the strongest men and women in the world are pointing to the value of doing psychological skills training. And they're getting extraordinary results, and they're talking about at the same time having a parallel path of meaning and purpose in their life. And I think about Carrie Walsh-Jennings, who has been very public with the work we've done and how she's got this 2-prong approach. If you don't know who Carrie Walsh-Jennings is, she's four-time Olympian, 3-time gold medalist, and took bronze in the last Olympics. Extraordinary at what she does in beach volleyball. And she's got a 2-prong goal: to be deeply connected to her loved ones and kick ass on the world stage. So yes, we need to train our mind. If we want to do and experience this life in a meaningful way, we definitely have to train our mind. And that's what Coach Carroll and I have built this business on the back of, are what are the proper science meets application principles and tactics to help people train their minds to be more present, to become more of themselves.
Okay, so let's separate out a principle and then a technology for a minute. So let's talk about a principle. Any guidance for us who are saying, yeah, I want to get better at my ratio of, appropriate amounts of acknowledging reality versus excessive negative emotion dwelling on things?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good question. And like we talked about earlier in part 1, is that it's a tapestry that we're weaving. And for some people, the components that we're stitching together to make this large tapestry, mindfulness might take up like 25% of the overall tapestry. For some people, optimism is very small because they're already like pretty optimistic and they don't need to spend a lot of time training it. But let's start with optimism. Let's start with mindfulness. So mindfulness by definition is a particular way of being present without judgment. So it's a particular way of being in this moment without all the self-critique. And the reason that that's important is because life happens in this moment. And underneath being present is a great awareness and a great concentration and focus. So with deep focus, we become more aware of four things. We become more aware of our thoughts. Either they're being productive or destructive. They're either building or taking away. So we become more aware of our thoughts. Yeah.
And do you have people literally like take the time to acknowledge that and like name it and claim it, or like what's if you get a little granular on that, what kind of training wheels do you give for people who are starting to learn?
So as soon as you become aware that you speak to yourself like your worst enemy or competitor or friend or whatever, like as soon as you become aware that you are talking shit to yourself more than you would ever say something to somebody else, what do you do with that? The first order, though, is awareness. Okay, so it's not, you can't do anything if you're not aware. So the first order is awareness. And then once you're aware of it, then we get into the skills. And so if you talk about being granular with the skills, there are thousands of skills. And so one of them could be to wink, like wink and smile, like, oh, there's that thought again. Okay, come on back to this moment. There's that thought again. Like, okay, hold on. Come back to where my feet are. There's that thought again. Oh, you know what? Golly, that shit is crazy. Why do I keep doing this to myself? I'm never going to figure it out. God, I know that I'm not supposed to speak this way, but why do I do this? I'm just not going to figure it out. Like, I don't, my life is going to be miserable. That's what happens. That's not readjusting. So that's awareness that you've got a shitty thought, but then you've got to be able to bring it back, right? So bring it back to what? Bring it back to something that you're doing in the present moment, something that's experienced in the present moment. It could be sun on your shoulder. It could be the food that you're eating. It could be the words that are coming out of somebody's mouth. Because you and I both know that while we're talking right now, and unfortunately I'm doing way too much talking, that you're having a conversation with yourself that is different than this conversation. Unless you're fully connected and engaged, and we're both in the midst of the conversation together. And that's what it means to be fully present. But there's unfortunately all this other internal distraction and noise that we've learned from extraordinary performers, is that they are better at gating that noise out. And as soon as negative stuff pops up, they just don't water it. They don't want it to grow. So they shut it down. Or they eloquently come back to now.
You know, it's interesting how many different people talk about this subject from different angles. Like it just comes up again and again. Do you know this guy? A lot of people don't know. Austrian philosopher Martin Buber from like 100 years ago. I do not. One of the Gnostics. He really was nuts about the idea that so much of the friction in our life comes from when we objectify other people, and that basically like the way we can think about, the way we can choose not to think about people like a pawn on our chessboard is by being deeply present with them. And that he felt like the ultimate humanization is being present, and that, you know, there's no need to justify our objectification of others if we're actually present with them, because then we won't be, or, you know, it lets us off from the blame game, and we can just acknowledge and apologize for the past and be present now, kind of thing. And so I'm thinking about, you know, there's a guy, Dr. Block. I've read his stuff. He's working on PTSD with soldiers, kind of showing how mindfulness can get the same results as drugs, basically, for helping PTSD. And it's got some tests have come in apparently that it's doing better than pharmaceuticals. And he has people do things like literally just rub their fingers together and like concentrate on what it feels like to breathe at a moment to like bring them back present. Do you guys get that granular with your stuff, or do you have tactics like that for somebody who's starting down this path of wanting to shut it off?
I suggest that not I suggest, but what I've come to learn is that everybody already knows how to do this.
Mm.
So what we ask people to do is we have a fundamental belief that everything you need is already inside you. Okay, so how
Hmm.
have you been successful in the past doing this? And they say, you know,
Mm.
I don't know. Okay, well let's take a minute here. This is important. How have you done this in your past? And they'll say, oh, you know what? I think I do it like this best. Great, let's go. That's it.
Write
Right?
that
Yeah.
down.
Okay. Good. Can you make a commitment to do that next time? Yeah, I can do that. I've done it in the past and it's worked. Okay. Well, there you go. So there's no right and wrong way. There's lots of
Mm.
tactics that you could use, but you've already figured some stuff out. Now, if someone says, "I've tried it, but I just don't think I don't think it's going to work for me now." I say, "Okay. Well, what do you think would work?" And they say, "I don't know. I'm lost. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know." Okay. Well, here's a couple that I've learned from other people. Do you want to try one of those? And so then there again is that they're making a choice. So if anytime somebody says to you, here's the way to do it, just start going, uh-oh, this is guru stuff here. Like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
like that's not, I don't know. I get really nervous of that, the sage on stage, the guru that knows better than me, or knows better than anybody. That being said, like I have incredible respect for people that have spent deep, nauseatingly deep focused amounts of time on trying to understand the nuances of a science or a craft or an art. And so we want to listen. But what we tend to find is those that have learned a lot realize that there's so much they don't know. And so that part is a really important part of the subtlety of mastery.
Yeah. What do you feel like are some of the other subtleties?
Um, Humility. So I think that we know from good research that experts tend to overestimate their skills and abilities. And then if you take a step up from experts, and there's a facilitative positive reason why that can play to somebody's advantage. But if you take a step up from experts and go into people that are masterful, they enter the space of humility. And because they realize that, oh my goodness, like there's so much to know. And there's a deep confidence that many of them have. And I don't want to be Pollyannish in any way by saying that, you know, uh, some people that are masterful at their craft are a disaster as a human. Like, yes, that's the case as well. So when I think of mastery of craft, I also want to put in there mastery of self. And it's the combination of those two that is rare but possible. And those are the folks that I want to study more deeply, or that I am
Yeah.
studying more
Who?
deeply.
Yeah. Can you tell some stories? Who are some people like that you look up to?
Yeah, there's some that you'll know and some that you won't know, and some that um, that have their life together and are exceptional at what they do. They tend not to be that public, and so I know many on the world stage that are masterful at craft, but are still on the journey of mastery of self. So those that mastery of self tends to happen later, and later meaning after the spotlight of media has shown on a young stud, right? It's the old bull that tends to have the mastery of self and mastery of craft together.
Yeah. It's okay if we haven't heard of them. I want to hear about. I would love to hear about somebody I haven't heard of actually, and what it is you admire about
Sure.
them.
Okay. So there's a gentleman that named Varun Soni, and he's a young professor and chaplain at USC. And at USC, they've got hundreds of spiritual practices on campus. And so he's dedicated his whole life to understanding um, the respect of other people's religions and their spiritual pathways. And so I think he is really switched on the path of mastery for sure. And both mastery of self and others. That's one.
Yeah. Any examples or like interactions with him or something he said to you or something you read about him?
No, the way that I've gotten to know him is that every interaction is that he's purposeful, he's grounded, he's present, he's sensitive to the nuances of other people. He's got a well of knowledge that is extraordinary about some of the deepest and hardest questions in the world, like what are we doing here, and how some of the most influential thinkers of the world tried to sort that out, like Gandhi, like um, Jesus, like Buddha, like Confucius. Like, how are they sorting this out? And another John Kabat-Zinn, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. And
No, no.
John Kabat-Zinn is one of the four, maybe grandfathers at this point. I don't know, but fathers of mindfulness in America, and he's the author of mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it's been a game changer for America for sure, and people that are as you would know that mindfulness is a buzzword for many people, and it's very much of the zeitgeist now. He was at the tip of the arrow 40 years ago, maybe even longer. And so John Kabat-Zinn has mastered his craft through mastery of self. He's exceptional. I think of people that are so humble that I've been fortunate enough to learn from and all of these people that I'm talking about are on the Finding Mastery podcast. Singer-songwriter.
Which, by the way, if people don't know what it is, it's findingmastery.net. You should definitely go listen to Michael's show.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that a lot. And this might sound counterintuitive, but singer-songwriter Joel. And so she is obviously very well known, and she's exceptional at her craft of singing, folk music, but her investment in meditation and mindfulness is unbelievable, and she has definitely figured some stuff out, and so she's exceptional in her own right as well. So I mean, those are some folks that, and I can say what makes her exceptional is she's been through the fire of pain, she's come through it, and she's better because of it. And that's the same with John Kabat-Zinn, and that's the same with just about anybody that I would put in that place, is that they have run to the edge on a regular basis, to the edge of their capacity, which means they run to the places that they're most unstable. They don't play it safe to look good or feel comfortable. And when you're at the edge of instability, you get burned, sometimes. So they've gone through the pain and letdown and disappointment and hurt and come through it a stronger human. And I think that that's an important part, definitely important part of the process.
Yeah. Well, I know we should get close to wrapping up part 2 of the episode here. But besides people obviously going to check out the podcast and seeing you and Coach Carol's company, compete2create.net, maybe a closing question for me would be, it seems like you have a similar interest that I do. We talked about before having a number of Tier 1 special ops guys, former Tier 1 guys who work at our consulting firm, and we've had guests on our show, and you've had guests on your show. To me, that's a fascinating group of people, and I'm interested in anything you feel like you've learned or observed from that population.
There's a commonality amongst these men and women who have invested their lives in the martial arts, the art of warfare. And something that keeps coming up for them is that they, without hesitation, know that there is far more inside of people because they've experienced it. They've run to the edge of their instability. And I think of one of my dear friends who ran SEALs Team 6 for a long time. And not 7, but 6. A lot of people say 7. But he's exceptional. And he says two things. And this sums up like many of the operators that I've been fortunate enough to learn from, is that he says, there's far more in you than you know. And the second thing he says is, when something really matters to you, you'll do whatever it takes. So the takeaway is to get really clear of what matters to you most. And when that's the case, you'll do whatever it takes, whether it's trafficking of children, whether that is whatever mission that you might be on in your life, to be a world-class parent for this beautiful soul that you brought into this world, or to be an entrepreneur that part of a technology or something, a startup that could potentially change lives.
I love it. I think that's a great place to end.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time, and congratulations on the success you've had in building your community and helping spread and amplify ideas from people that have a lot of care. And so I wish you the best in your foundation as well.
Hey, thanks so much for making time today.
Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York, and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for like 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run, and it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in like 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.